So I think it's really timely, actually, for all of us. For some of you who have, medium to large organisations, about half the group running a business, we're coming back to life. Some of us are doing really well through COVID. And it's a really good point in time now to think about our strategy creation process and what it is you want to do to bring your company back online and make it even stronger and even better in the new year. And I'm actually really pumped about where we're all at this point in time in our economic kind of growth, because I think the way that we've worked has changed forever. We went into a little breakout session before, and the group that I was with talked about how excited they were in terms of what they were looking forward to actually being able to come back and be physically in a space with people again. And we wondered, what will it be like? Will people sort of just snap right back to what it was? Will they all flock back to offices? Or will we actually maintain some of the ways that we're working, really keep the best of what we've had? So we've definitely changed the way we've worked, and I actually think some of these changes are here to stay. Now, there's no doubt that COVID caused a great deal of pain and suffering, and no one knows that better than Victorians. You guys have done an amazing job at getting the numbers right down to zero and now being able to enjoy some freedom. So congratulations to all of you. But I actually think that what's so great about what's happened to all of us is that the pandemic was the disruption that we had to have. It's forced us to rapidly adopt technologies that have made flexible and remote working options more possible. And it's also opened up access to a much larger talent pool, not only a larger talent pool, but a larger customer pool. So it no longer matters so much where you live, where you work, or where you shop, where you buy, or how you buy. So in a lot of ways, we've actually been able to access new customer groups that we might not have had as much access to before. It's also forced us to change the way that we judge productivity and performance. So without having an eyeline or visibility on people turning up and showing up and being in the office, we can't assess people based on seeing them anymore. Now we have to actually adopt different practices so that we're more fairly and equitably judging people based on their output, the quality and frequency of their connections, and the results that they actually produce. And it's also forced us to prioritise mental well-being, to structure exercise into our days, to take more of an interest in the personal lives of our co-workers and colleagues. So it's been a great equaliser, this whole experience. But what it does do is pose great new challenges for those of you in the room who are business leaders, people who are running and owning businesses. And so what it's asking you to do is change the way that you lead and change the way that you connect with your market. So really the question that we need to ask ourselves is, how do we actually accept this new dynamic and lead our teams to high performance, regardless of the size or type of your workforce, regardless of where they live, regardless of where your customers are? So I think if you're a founder or a CEO, your job, your fundamental job, if you're running a business or leading a team, is to generate the 3 fundamental ingredients of a high-performing organisation. If your team is high-performing, it demonstrates these 3 things. It has clear purpose, people with passion, and measurable performance. Now, we need all 3. They're all critical. And purpose without passion is just an empty cause. Passion without purpose, well, that's just dangerous. And purpose and passion without performance, that's wasted effort. We need all 3. And in fact, it doesn't matter if your business is surviving, reviving, or thriving. If your team has the 3 Ps of high performance, there's no doubt that you will be able to weather that storm and adapt to the market conditions that you're facing. So what we need to create high-performing organisations are these 3 things. But to create these 3 things, we need to focus on our systems of performance. Now, organisations, no matter how big or small, they are complex networks of interconnecting parts. They themselves are complex systems. And typically, organisations are represented as hierarchical structure charts, these charts that map accountability lines in an organisation. But what those charts don't map is the complex web of interactions that happen in your business every day in the service of your customers. So if you're dealing with an organisational system, what you need is a set of principles and practices to improve how those parts work together, how those interconnecting parts and people in your system work together. Systems provide leaders with the framework required to change habits across an entire organisation. And once you have a system in place, you can let the system do the work for you. And the more integrated the system, the better the result. Systems provide the scaffolding that support high-performance cultures. Systems create habits which create results. So if you want to create a high-performance system where the 3 Ps are a key feature, what you need to think about are your systems for high performance. So I'd like to introduce you to this model, a model which is called the high performance system. And it includes 3 interconnected systems for leadership, culture, and strategy. And for each, there's an empirically proven process that maximizes results. Leadership fuels purpose by connecting people to their purpose in the organization and the organization's purpose within its market. Culture fuels passion by connecting people to a shared system of values and beliefs. And strategy fuels performance by ensuring that all team members set and are accountable to measurable results. And they work together like this toy, this fidget spinner. So I don't know if anybody has children and can remember, this was the hottest toy of 2019. And essentially, when I saw my son playing with this, I thought about what are the 3 things, if purpose, passion, and performance are really important, what are the 3 things driving those features of a high-performing organisation? And when you get these 3 things, leadership, culture, and strategy working together, and you get them spinning together, they create their own momentum, and they keep spinning and they last for ages. Now, if one of these arms of this fidget spinner was out of balance, then the whole thing would essentially slow down and stop. So what we actually need to do is get leadership working in our business to drive purpose, a clear culture which is based on our values and purpose and beliefs that drives engagement and passion, and then ultimately direct all of that energy into a strategy or a plan for whatever it is you want to do, whether you just want to hold in your market, attract a new market, or grow and sustain your results. And the net of doing all of these things well is profit. Now, profit's not the reason we do business, but it is the outcome of doing business well. And profit is the result of a clearly defined purpose, fueling passion amongst all stakeholder groups, driving performance and measurable results. So profit is the life-giving blood of an organisation. It keeps the system flowing and growing. So if you're a business owner and you agree that your role is to generate these 3 Ps of high performance, then what you need to do is focus on your systems. And today, we're going to do a deep dive on strategy. When I was talking to Mitchell about today's session, and he was saying, I really want to be able to give our community some really specific tools and skills. And I asked him, well, what do you think is most relevant to people right now, coming out of COVID? Is it about how they lead their businesses? Is it about how they generate passion and engagement in their businesses? Or is it actually about how they drive their businesses towards performance and results? And we both agreed actually at the moment, what we think businesses need most is really clear strategy about how you want to emerge and how you want to come back in 2021. So that's why we're going into the strategy system today. But if you want to learn a little bit more about any of the other systems, you can actually order a copy of my book, which details processes, the how-tos of all of them. So let's get into it. First of all, what is strategy? At its most basic level, strategy is a plan to realizing a vision. So who had a plan at the start of the year? Let's see a show of hands. Show me your hands. Did you have a plan? How good was that plan when COVID hit? Yeah. I had a plan. I had a wonderful plan. I'm actually still grieving the loss of my plan. I was going to take my family overseas. We were going to go to Europe with my mum and my sisters, and we were going to have this amazing 5-week adventure with the kids. And then I was going to grow my business by 30% sales, and I was going to enter into a brand new market. And then I was going to give like 5 extra days of time to a non-for-profit. I had some really, really good plans. And then COVID happened and it all changed. I spent 5 months at home. I ended up writing a book and I learned how to really appreciate school teachers more than I ever have before. But funnily enough, the market was still buying, just not in the manner and the format that I expected. So I recalibrated my expectations just like what everyone else did. And I did the most ever overused word in the history of words. I pivoted. Everyone else pivot? Who pivots? Everyone pivots now, right? Okay, so we've all pivoted. So really, we could ask ourselves, what's the point in having a strategy? What's the point in having a plan at all, when really all we need to do is be adaptive and responsive and respond to the market need and kind of not get held up about the fact that I had a plan that's now no longer beneficial or useful in this current environment? Well, I think it's a little bit of both. And I think what's great about a plan is that it sets us on a path. It helps us articulate where we want to be, and it gets us going on that path. And we base that plan we form plans based on what we already know, our experiences, our ideas, and we base it all on the inputs that we have at the time. But what the point of that plan is that it just gets you moving. It gets you out there, moving towards your vision. And that's where you get the real benefit. It's the action. It's where you learn the nature of the game that you're playing. So plans are great, but they have to be put to the test. And the quicker they can be put to the test, the more we can learn and the more effective our planning and strategy process becomes. And then we get to go back out there and try things that are more quick, at a faster rate. We get more effective and we learn more. And then we come back and our planning process becomes even better again. And this becomes a really positive reinforcing cycle of strategy creation followed by strategy execution. It's an infinity model. And essentially we play the game of 4 quarters. We play the strategy game of 4 quarters. So strategy is really enhanced when we treat it as this dynamic process of creation followed by execution. So the 4 quarters could be spread over a year, a month, a day. It depends on whatever your time scale is that you're working to. But each time we take this swing at strategy creation, we reflect on our learned experience, we reset our approach, and we reprioritize our actions. So we build up a plan, and then we get back out there and we execute the plan. And we hit snags, and we discover opportunities that we hadn't potentially anticipated. But we keep going and we learn from that. So then we come back at it. And this perpetual process helps us get better at creating a plan and executing a plan and learning from that. Ultimately, while strategy can be viewed as a plan to realizing a vision, it's so much more than that. It's an essential process that drives engagement, facilitates rapid learning and adaptation, and activates team intelligence. And it aligns efforts towards your vision. Our vision and our purpose doesn't change, but the paths and the routes we take to get there might become clearer as we go. So where does strategy usually go wrong? What gets in the way of this strategy creation, strategy execution process that we are all playing every day? Well, the way I see it, there's 3 things we tend to let get in the way. First of all, is we fail to align first on a single source of the truth. So a large part of strategy creation is the facilitation of coming together of multiple viewpoints. It's about finding some common ground, testing that we're actually all talking about the same thing and agreeing on what we're going to work on to get there. So a CEO I used to work with, he was a fantastic visionary. He was an exceptional strategist, a very good communicator. And he'd have a new idea and he'd have 10 of them every day, and he would always be running at 100 miles an hour. But he'd come in and he'd communicate his idea to in his meetings to his executive team, to his leadership team around him. And he'd speak very clearly and very succinctly, and he'd have a PowerPoint deck and all of that. And then his team would take what they heard and go into their teams, and they would translate that into action within their own part of the business. But the challenge with his approach was that each executive would execute their version of his story. His truth was reinterpreted through their truth. And so what happens is multiple variations of the truth were executed, and unintentionally misalignment occurs. And the outcome of all of that is wasted effort and slower growth. So if strategy is in your head, if it's not physically put down on paper and confirmed with all those who must contribute, then it's subject to misinterpretation and will lead to misalignment. And oftentimes we think we've communicated and we've had a conversation, but what happens is we forget that that person has taken what they've heard and they're going to run with that through their own filter. So we need to stop first and align on the single source of the truth and then move on. So that's where we get it wrong on the strategy creation side. But then we also have challenges in strategy execution. The biggest problem that most companies and organizations have with strategy is execution. It's realizing the potential value of the strategic plan. So Michael Mankins and Richard Steele did a study and reported it in the Harvard Business Review that companies typically only realize about 60% of their strategy's potential value. And it's not because the plan was flawed, it's because of the defects and breakdowns in planning and execution of the plan. So that's 30% of value that we're typically missing out on because we haven't done the work of converting a plan into an action. And then finally, the third thing that happens, we get lost in that translation piece between an organisational strategy and an individual's role in executing on that strategy. So there's often a very big chasm between what is an organisational plan and an individual's understanding of what their job is, their role is in driving the results that are relevant to that plan. So Jerome de Flander, he's the author of this book here, Strategy Execution Heroes, and he talks about initiative management. It's the point where organisational performance meets individual performance. It's how managers manage these initiatives. And his research of over 1,000 organisations, of those, 27% say that their strategic initiatives aren't managed correctly. So about 30% of 1,000 organisations would say that we fail in translation because these initiatives aren't resourced well enough, they're budgeted poorly, they don't have clear ownership, they just flat out launch the wrong projects. People don't receive information about the how of execution. They don't receive information from other departments about what they're doing. They're unable to explain how to set individual objectives or to even explain the strategy itself. So we might have a great strategic plan and it's clear and it's on paper, but we then don't do the work translating that down to individual action. So the key to realizing full value from your strategy is to gain alignment across your organization, to get it out of people's heads and onto a page, and to make it not just clear, but really actionable at the organizational team and individual level. So what we have in front of us now is a strategy ladder. It describes the stages of strategy creation and whether your strategy is invisible or actionable, and therefore the impact it has on what people focus on, how they think, how they ultimately behaved, and therefore the degree that towards people being aligned versus misaligned. So right at the bottom of the ladder, we have invisible. Strategy just doesn't exist, okay? It's in people's heads only. We just talk about it every day. And typically what happens is that people are caught in a reactive cycle. They're reacting to whatever the greatest priority of the day is, and ultimately drowning under the weight of competing priorities. In these companies, we do see a high degree of misalignment. Then we have outdated strategy. So it is there, it exists, but it's old news. We haven't really been going through that process of strategy creation to strategy execution and coming back and kind of keeping it relevant. So what happens there is that people have to assume what the priorities are and they have to play guesswork about what to work on. Now we get better alignment, but it's still not ideal because they've got a few indicators about what's relevant to the business, but those indicators aren't updated. They're not relevant now. Then we have strategies that are complicated. They're actually overworked, okay? So they're too long and unwieldy. That ex-CEO I talked about before, he was really typical of this. He'd deliver a 15 PowerPoint presentation and there was so much data in it and so many actions and so many priorities. It was really hard to know what was the most important one or where teams needed to align to work on them. So what that causes is people to start questioning what's relevant, and therefore they waste time and energy competing on what they think are the priorities. And ultimately, again, we don't get great alignment. Then we have clear strategies. So they're actually nice and simple. They use plain language, they articulate what drives business performance, and you don't need a business degree to interpret them. They have memorable one-liners that effectively tell the story about the company purpose, the vision, and the direction. So a clear strategy is something that people can accept and ultimately plan for, and we get better alignment with those. And then finally, we have actionable strategy. Now, an actionable strategy is one that talks about not just what we have to achieve and what good looks like, but it describes the how, it describes what we need to work on to get there, the actions that drive results. When that's really clear, people can focus on achieving by getting the actions complete, and so they implement strategy, and therefore we get much greater degrees of alignment. So to move your strategy from invisible to actionable, what are the systems of strategy that you need to adopt? So I'd love to hear from you in the chat box now, if you're happy to share, where do you think your strategy creation process is right now? Is your strategy invisible? Is it outdated? Is it maybe overcomplicated? Or actually have you done quite a lot of work to make it nice and clear and succinct? And do you actually feel that your strategy is actionable? So let's see what you've got to say. Where is your strategy right now? Feel free to pop your comments in the comments box, in the chat box. $55 to $45 mark. I love a man who plays with some ratios. That's always good. Well done. But I invite you to have a think about where you think you are and whether or not you think you've got an opportunity to improve your strategic planning process. Yeah, great, fantastic. Very easy for things to get outdated, 100%. All right, so how do we do that? So the strategy system takes strategy from being invisible to actionable, and it results in much greater degrees of alignment. By implementing a system for strategy, this allows your team to learn and continually apply this strategy creation to strategy execution process, which allows you to remain agile and responsive to shifting market trends, while also continuing to closely align with your purpose and values as an organisation. So it aligns the whole team to work collaboratively, and it involves 3 core processes as described around the outside of the triangle. The first is we create a one-page business plan that is clear and actionable strategy on a page. The second is cascading goals through to teams and individuals through alignment sessions. And then the third process is evaluating and reviewing performance. And what we're doing at each of these phases is we're looking at and reflecting on how the company or the organisation is performing against all of those things on the inside of the triangle. So we're evaluating, are we living our purpose? Are we living our values? Are we on track with our vision? Do we need to recalibrate that? What are our drivers of success, our pillars, our goals, and our KPIs of performance? And then what are the priorities that determine what we should be working on right now? How do teams, what are the team priorities, and what are my priorities? And then ultimately we need to keep evaluating those things. So this adopting a system for strategy, actually creating a process for how you do it, fosters transparency, and it results in clarity of purpose, goal alignment, and leadership accountability. So let's look at each of these in a little bit more detail now. If you want to create clear and actionable strategy, have a think first of all about how birds fly in formation. So this symmetric V shape, it's adopted by many migratory bird species. And the V formation is more than just a beautiful sight to behold. It has a very important function. The first thing it does is it reduces resistance. It reduces wind resistance, which conserves the bird's energy. And secondly, it actually serves as a good communication mechanism. So it allows each bird to keep track of every other bird in the group. These birds operate in alignment. They all know where they're going, and they share the responsibility and accountability for the group. They step up to the front, they fly in front when they need to, and they drop behind when they tire and they need another bird to go in front. So they all lead and follow in equal measure, and they leverage the shared capability of the whole group. So like creating a flock of birds that fly in formation, a one-page business plan really enables your team to efficiently and effectively migrate from where they are now to where they need to be. And it translates your vision into clear and measurable action. So a one-page business plan is a methodology that's been adopted over the last couple of decades. And it was the idea initially came from Robert Kaplan and David Norton in this book, The Balanced Scorecard Approach. Such a serious title, but a great book. They wrote this book in the 1996, and they talk about the concept of having a balanced perspective of performance. So they introduce this concept of, if you're going to look at creating a high-performance organisation, you need to create, don't just look at financial measures of success, actually look at how you measure success for your customer group, how you measure success from your productivity and internal business process perspective, and then finally, how you measure success for your people. So what they were saying was, have a balanced view of success and set goals, measures, and targets against each of these 4 pillars in order to achieve your strategic vision. So this balanced scorecard approach has been adopted by a number of different companies. And I think what's great about it is you don't have to stick rigidly to these kind of pillar names. You can call them what you like. So an example of another company that I've worked with, an FMCG, they had, their pillars were grow customer base, that was their customer one, build bench strength was their people one, drive productivity was their process one, and manage costs was their finance one. And what they also did was add a 5th pillar called innovate, because new innovation, new product development was so imperative to their growth that they wanted to add it as a pillar. So Kaplan and Norton talk about this balanced scorecard approach as use it as a tool, not a straitjacket. But it's an idea that I think is great, and it helps us think a bit more holistically about driving success within our business. So since then, a number of different one-page plans have emerged, in particular, Vern Harnish, who started Scaling Up, the Rockefeller Habits. Now, a lot of people have come across Vern. He's also the founder of the Entrepreneurs Organisation. And he designed a one-page plan, which I think is really fantastic. He took this balanced scorecard process and he put it on a page, and he also included a number of other variables such as your purpose, your vision, your values, and your quarterly priorities. Now, I love Vern's tool, and I've also seen a lot of other tools emerge over time. Another one has been called Traction by Gino Whitman. So these are all good resources to have if you're thinking about your strategy creation process. But I think what all of them lack is the clarity on not just the what and why, but the how. How do people need to work together to execute strategy? This addresses that specific point that Jerome de Flanders was saying about the missing link between this initiative management, between organisational performance and individual performance. So the one-page plan methodology that I propose is actually 2 sides of 1 page. So the front page encompasses the bigger picture, the purpose, the values of your organisation, and your vision. So I suggest putting a 1, 3 and 10-year vision, but put whatever timescale you like. It could be a 1 and 3 or a 1, 2 and 5. You decide on the timescale. Use the Kaplan and Norton balanced scorecard approach. So thinking about the strategic drivers of your business and set a clear goal and measurables against each of those pillars. But then on the back page of the plan, actually list out what are the priorities, what are the activities we need to deliver in order to drive those results that sit on the front page, and what departments are responsible for them. So if each of those departments stood for product development, sales, marketing, etc., who needs to collaborate to deliver these priorities? And ultimately, who's accountable? Who's going to be the person driving outcomes in this particular priority? So if what we can do is then link the actions and activities of people to the results, what we're helping them understand is how what they do drives results in organisations. And that's a critical learning and development thing for people to know. I know the activities that I perform that are value creating activities, as opposed to the activities that aren't. And if I can decipher those things, and I know how and where I need to prioritise my time. That's an education that has to happen across all levels of a business, not just within the executive or the leadership team. So how do you actually create this plan? Well, you could probably sit down this afternoon and map it out on a piece of paper, and that would be really great for you. But what you then have missed is an opportunity to engage the people around you to help you build it. If you're going to deliver performance through them, they need to have skin in the game. They need to contribute to it. And so a really great practice that a lot of businesses are now adopting is an annual strategy retreat. And I put retreat in inverted commas because what is a retreat these days? Is it a day in the park together? Is it a Zoom session? Or is it the typical thing we would consider as a retreat, a day or 2 down on the Mornington Peninsula? The retreat doesn't have to cost a lot of money, but the idea is that you get yourself out of your normal zone and together in a different place where you can actually just think together about what is strategically relevant and important to us. What are we using to measure our success, and who is accountable for those results? So here is a very basic kind of agenda that you might use if you're going to have a retreat. But the idea is that you spend some time together really thinking through some of these major issues. So the next part of the strategy creation process is to cascade and align with the team. And essentially what you want to do here is help people translate how what's on the plan is relevant for them within their team sphere as much as it is for them within their individual sphere. So this translation process is a really important step that a lot of people miss. And this is the problem that I talked about before, that we hit, where things get lost in translation. So we want to try and avoid that. Teams need to feel very connected. They need to feel connected to the purpose, to the values, to the vision, and to the strategy. And the more connected they are, the more they feel like this is their strategy, not yours, the more empowered they are to contribute to the outcome. So what we want to do is cascade these KPIs, these markers for success, from your business plan to potentially a team plan if you're in an organisation with, you know, a number of departments, and then ultimately to an individual plan. People need time to do this. They need forums where they can talk about this and understand that. And when we cascade priorities, essentially what happens is we've got big picture items on the back page of a business plan, but sub-priorities that might have to be kind of mapped out at the team and individual level. And accountabilities. So that accountability line is kind of shared all the way through, from the CEO through to the person on the front line. So the outcome of a really great cascading process is an individual performance and development plan that clearly outlines that individual's goals and KPIs. But more importantly than that, it's not just their performance goals. An individual plan should also contain their development goals. So what is it that they want to learn, and how do they want to progress in their career over the course of the time period that we're talking about here? Ideally, they're getting stretched a little bit outside of their comfort zone. So we're setting performance goals that are going to challenge people. Because what that means is that we are motivated to learn and grow into our roles at all times. So if we're not green and growing, we're ripe and rotting, which was a really great thing that my director of people and culture, where I used to work back in the old days, used to tell me. People need to feel like they're growing, like they're being challenged. So this process of growing a business means we also get to grow people, and my plan is a place where that's all captured and talked about. So team alignment sessions, these happen quarterly. We have an annual business planning process, but quarterly we need to get back together within our teams to actually discuss, okay, where are we up to in this process? Oh, excuse me. The air conditioning can sometimes wreak havoc on my voice. So just as the annual strategy retreat is kind of a team day that's facilitated potentially by the business owner or an external facilitator, whatever you want to use, team leaders need to create those forums for their people as well. Their people need that opportunity to kind of wrestle with the strategic plan, understand what does this mean for us? How do we need to prioritize our time? What results are we looking at? What should we actually set as a target for success? So one really simple way that one team translated this was a warehouse team that I used to work with, and they wanted to get better at getting more units out the door every day. So they literally decided our marker for success is number of units every day. And they wrote it on chalk on the floor by the kind of entry door. And every day somebody would come up and they would write the new number, and then either put an up arrow or a down arrow indicating it got better or it got worse or it basically stayed the same, which was no arrow. So every day they got used to looking at a number, and they got used to coming in and saying, we want to beat that number today. And that was a motivational force for them. Simplest tool ever. But what a great way to get people to start focusing on how their activities drive results. So it doesn't have to be a complicated thing, but we do need to have these opportunities where people actively link their performance to results. And then finally, we have team quarterly alignment sessions. So these are times when people get together and they have these discussions. The last point in pegging in this wheel is evaluating and reviewing performance. So essentially what we want to do is check in on results often. And we want to create these forums where we're checking in on those results. So like that team created a marker on the floor, you know, there's lots of opportunities we could think about creatively about a dashboard or some kind of reporting tool that you use. And so you could think about these cycles of reporting from an annual to a quarterly to a monthly and to a weekly, but have a performance cycle in mind and determine what it is you can do to create these conversations with your people around how you're actually going about going from strategy creation to strategy execution and back again. So there you have it, the strategy system that drives accountability and results and ultimately drives performance. And there are numerous advantages to this. Teams become more inspired by the bigger picture. They can talk about strategy in simple terms. They learn how their day-to-day performance impacts results. They're educated in the indicators of success. They start to behave and think like business owners. And in times of change and market volatility, such as now, it enables us to pivot and stay relevant in our process. As I mentioned before, if you do want to read a little bit more about this or have an actual how-to guide as to how to put all this into practice, please do feel like you can access my book. And there we have it.